August 16, 2021. Afghans flocked to Kabul airport, desperate for a way out of the country. Hours earlier, the Taliban claimed power in Afghanistan, sending shockwaves across the world and bringing back memories of the terror they instilled here some 20 years ago. Afghanistan's new rulers promised that flogging, stoning, and summary executions belong in the past. But has the Taliban really changed? And what will their return mean for Afghanistan and its people? My name is Anelise Borges, and I'm an international correspondent at Euronews. As thousands of Afghans rushed out of their country, I went in to witness this pivotal moment in Afghanistan's history. How do you enter a country when the government has collapsed and the airport shut down? After days negotiating with different authorities, I'm on a bus about to cross into Afghanistan via land. As I reach Torkhan, on the Afghan-Pakistani border, Afghanistan's president has fled. The Taliban has taken over the capital, and I embark on a journey into the unknown. Can I film from the car discreetly?
Yes, please.
On the road to Kabul, it is striking to see Taliban manning military infrastructure, government buildings, and checkpoints. They are also featured on billboards as the new heroes in town. This is their land now. We've been driving for about 4 hours from the border crossing with Pakistan. Along the way, we have seen quite a lot of Taliban presence. Many cars, fighters and soldiers manning checkpoints. We'll enter Kabul very soon, and we're going to find out what the situation is like in the Afghan capital. Entering Kabul, I'm now confronted with what up until recently would have been unimaginable. Taliban fighters are everywhere and seem pleased with the effect their presence has on people. They like the attention and agree to pose for the camera. I get closer and ask if they can answer my questions. To my surprise, they agree to speak to me, or rather, through me.
ټول د افغانستان ولس دلته چې په دې ځای کې چې ټول ته امن د موږ عفو اعلان کړی ده هغه که مجرمي که غیر مجرمي ټول ته موږ عفو ده موږ امیرالمؤمنین طرف عفو ده نو دوی په مال او سر جایداد ټول په امن کې دي او څوک چې موږ بهر ته تللی دي هغه د بیرته روش خپل هیواد ته افغانستان ته دا به انشاءالله په ګډه جوړوو دا زموږ دنده ده موږ به اسلام ته خدمت کوو بیا به وطن ته خدمت کوو دا زموږ دنده ده.
But what kind of administration will the Taliban lead? The answer I got sounded pretty good.
اینده د فکر د انشاءالله اسلامي نظام د جوړېږي به او انشاءالله روان ده په کم ټایم کې هر چې به انشاءالله اسلامي نظام به وي هغه به د مال د ناموس د ټولو حفاظت دپاره به انشاءالله هغه د ټولو پکې خیر ده زنانهو پکې خیر ده د طالبانو پکې خیر ده عام ولس ټولو پکې خیر ده.
As I hear this, I am struck by how similar the message is to when the group was first created. Back in the 1990s, Taliban leaders were already trying to appeal to Afghans weary after years of conflict and Soviet occupation. They used to talk about fighting for peace, security, and stability. Will this message resonate with Afghans today? Or is this a different country now, after 20 years of US presence? On my second day in Kabul, workers are ordered to cover the once colorful murals that used to convey messages of peace and hope with white paint and Islamic anti-US slogans.
Is that what they have to write?
Yeah.
So they're blaming the Americans for the blood spilled.
Yeah.
It is clear the Taliban wants to rewrite the narrative. And I'm starting to wonder whether that will involve manipulating the story I'm reporting. You were stopped by the Taliban and they gave you this?
Yes.
So you don't think that this is to help you, this is to actually monitor you?
Yes. It's why I put it in here.
Ahmad and Tawfiq, my team here, have the tough mission of getting me around heavily armed militia men looking to assert their new power. They negotiate checkpoints and interviews while getting their own heads around this new reality. I know my very presence here could put them at risk, and never have I felt so much pressure to calculate my every step. We decide we will stay in Afghanistan for as long as it is safe for them, but we will be getting very close to crossing that line. The next day, I get a glimpse of what the Taliban rule looks like. Men are being ordered to crouch while they wait to enter a bank in central Kabul. When the Taliban swept to power, vital foreign aid was frozen, leaving banks here short of cash. The tension is palpable. Exhausted, afraid, these Afghans are getting shouted at, shoved around, and more. It's not exactly the most traditional way of crowd control. These Taliban members, they are screaming, they're beating people with sticks, trying to keep them sitting down while they wait for the line. This is an attempt, of course, by the Taliban to organize the situation. A lot of people here are having real trouble accessing cash. But this is the very first experience the Taliban have in terms of coordinating what should be an ordinary operation. And the way that they're handling things is very difficult to watch. From the moment I set foot in Afghanistan, it was very clear this was a country on the edge. And while I'm used to reporting from crisis-stricken places, here,
Anelise
even
Borges,
setting up my live shots is tricky.
One thing is to fight, another thing is to actually run the show, rebuild institutions, and more importantly, address the economy.
I discovered that gunfire is an almost daily occurrence in the Afghan capital. Afghanistan has a history of war and occupation. And I want to understand the impact this constant violence has on people here. For that, I asked to see the site that's become the tragic symbol of the despair triggered by this latest crisis, Hamid Karzai International Airport, where tens of thousands of Afghans ran to escape the suffering, only to be met with more of it. This video was filmed by an Afghan colleague working for Euronews. It shows the moment when ISIS-K, a terror group with links to the so-called Islamic State, carried out a suicide attack that claimed the lives of over 200 people, including 13 U.S. servicemen. It's pretty horrific being here. It's, there's some... Yeah, I don't know that I can quite describe the feeling of being here, the smell, and yeah, it's really, really dark. The explosion happened right here. You can still see marks of it, and all around us, there are personal belongings scattered, abandoned in this place. This is the sewage canal from where the terrorist is believed to have accessed this area. And of course, this is where many of the bodies ended up. Including Mohammed's.
این بچه من که شهید شد تکواندوکار بود در عضو تیم ملی بود تقریبا 25 سال داشت مسابقات داخلی زیاد شرکت کردم که مدالایش هست و تقدیرنامه‌اش هم هست بازگمی مثال که یک تحولات آمد که دولت رفت و طالبا آمد بسیار یک وحشت گرفته بود مردم که طالبا چی میکنه با مردم باز کل یکی متر حرکت کرده بود که بریم خب یه هم دکلیه شمی رسته بود که ما هم بریم از افغانستان خود بکشیم باز ما گفتم نرو گفتم کس کار نداره طالبا ما و شما دوسیه نداریم جرم نداریم نظامی هم نیستیم خب تنها ورزشکار هستید به ورزشکارا کار نداره باز روز چهارشنبه که سوم سنبله بود دو خانه چته بود این طرف ما بودیم اون طرف بچه بود باز همسرش آمد قدش یک چیز گفت ما نشوندم بسیار آیسته گفت همه شوندم میدان هوایی این چیزا گفت باز پرسان کردم که چی گفت گفته دیگر نیست اسنادار داد رفت که ما برم یه اسنادار نشان بتم که در قبول میشم برم یعنی بود که زن خود قد بچه خود بیرون مانده بود خودش نزدیک میدان هوایی رفته بود که انفجاری شد و انتحار شد فیر شد دیگه شهید شد این تا این بچهش هست اون بچهش هست 14 سال است این دخترش 2 سال است
And he's 4.5 years old, his son, and that is her daughter, 2.5 years old.
آیندهش مشکل است دیگه از اینکه تا اینا به ثمر برسه من خودم هم از کمر معیوب هستم خب از دنیا هم چیزی ندارم این خانم در کراسته که پیش از این خود از بچه بود تیار میکرد حالی موتور پادر واسطه
Mohammed did not die from the blast, but from a bullet in his head. Witnesses say American and Taliban soldiers panicked after the explosion and fired at everything that moved, causing the most casualties.
مادر جان میگه شما حال که بچه‌تان را ندارین چی احساس میکنین و فکر میکنین چی کسایی بچه‌تان را شهید ساختن مقصرش کیه؟
مقصر طالبا و امریکای دیگه برار ما دیگه کی شهید کرد
و شما چی احساس دارین همین از که بچه‌تان را خسته
یعنی خودت بفهم که ما چی احساس تمام دنیا دست زرم بد خورده این امروز رفتم در سر خاکشی سنگ چه به جواب محمد جواب نداد آدم که یک دانه پسر در شد دیگه چی احساس میکنه همه احساس میکنم کاش که محمد مرم از پشت خود کش کنه
After decades of conflict, the media often speaks of countless lives lost in Afghanistan. I am now discovering the individual tragedies behind the statistics. As my team and I continue reporting, I start to realize what ordinary life is like for Afghans these days. Every time I am recording in the streets of Kabul, this is what happens. Quite a lot of people gather around to try to understand what it is that I'm saying. Many here are struggling. They have been here for many days trying to access money from the banks. There is a shortage of hard currency here in Afghanistan. The Taliban cannot access the government's funds, and so there's simply not enough cash to go around, and this is the result of that. Thousands of people every day coming to banks all over the city trying to get money so that they can buy food, so that they can buy medicine. A father here just told me that he needed to take his child to hospital and he's unable to do that because he doesn't have any cash. Many have come here with their children and they say they've been waiting since 4, 5 in the morning. It's really heartbreaking because this is where you see what happens when there is no government, when there is no help. And even though the international community has been pledging help, many countries saying that they want to help ordinary Afghans stuck here with this crisis, so far help is very slow coming.
Most of the people have here lots of problems, the problem that we cannot think about. Most of the people having something for their eating. And even there are the families, there are the children, women, girls at hospital that they don't have money to pay for their treatment. We don't know that we should call for whom. There is no government here right now. You know that the Taliban locked everywhere.
Like Hasib, a majority of the workforce in Afghanistan used to be employed by the government. Many are now out of a job and don't know who to turn to for help.
Right now out of school, we don't think about education, we don't think about university, just we are talking here about, and we are right now struggling for being alive.
As I continue my journey, I come to realize that struggle starts early in Afghanistan. Anwar and his brother Saeed are proof of that. This is one of the most difficult places in the world to grow up. And Afghan children are now faced with an extra layer of uncertainty.
What's your name?
Do you know the Taliban? Do you know? The Taliban knows it inherited a country on the verge of collapse. Half the population was already in need of humanitarian assistance before this latest crisis. Members of the group say Afghans should be glad to finally have rulers who understand their problems. The question is, can they solve them? In the streets of Kabul, there is a semblance of normality. People are going about their business, carrying on with life, but many Afghans I've been speaking to say they're worried about their future. They say they don't trust the Taliban. The memories of the past are still too painful, too vivid, and many people here don't know if the Taliban can actually deliver a government. They know that these fighters can fight, can wage war, but can they actually run the country? September 7, 2021. For days, the world has been wondering how the Taliban will structure their regime. The group promised that this complex nation, divided in almost every way possible along ethnic, religious, and ideological lines, would get an inclusive administration.
I've got the list here of this new caretaker government announced today. This much anticipated announcement was actually finally public in the middle of the afternoon here in Kabul. And as you mentioned, we have a very interesting composition, interesting names on this list, including, of course, Mullah Muhammad Hassan Akhund, one of the founders of the Taliban, but also Sirajuddin Haqqani, the head of the infamous Haqqani network, said to be connected to Al-Qaeda and responsible for some of the deadliest attacks here in Afghanistan. He's going to be the interior minister of the Islamic Emirate of Afghanistan. That is the new title of this country. That is the new name of Afghanistan. That's the name the Taliban wants the world to know. As expected, no women part of this administration, no women on this list. And as you mentioned as well, no different ethnic groups, no members of different ethnic groups represented here. The Taliban had promised that this was going to be an inclusive government, but for now at least what we are having in front of us are members of the Taliban, different ranks of the Taliban, members of the history of this group. And of course, no time frame was given as to when a more permanent government will be formed.
The all-male, all-clerical and all-Taliban composition of the new administration seems almost designed to provoke and to show the world the group sees no reason to compromise with anyone. What happened to the pledge of a government for all Afghans? And what future for those who are not part of the Taliban's project? How far will they be pushed aside? To try to answer those questions, I want to get closer to the group. And for that, I need to speak to a more senior figure. We approach a commander living in an occupied mansion with his fighters. Qari Harimullah Sajed agreed to an interview, but asked to have the questions before we started so that he could prepare his answers. I didn't say no. After his man staged the shot, placing the movement's flag in the background, we could begin. At 43, Commander Sajed has been with the Taliban since the group was founded 3 decades ago and has an intimate understanding of this complex movement. I asked him if he also understood how Afghans felt about them. I've been speaking to many people who have told me they are afraid of you. They are afraid of the Taliban. Do you understand their fear?
د افغانستان خلک له طالبان نه ځکه نه ډارېږي چې افغانستان ولس دغه طالبان چې جوړ دي افغانستان له ولس نه جوړ دي او دا د افغانستان د ولس بچیان دي نو له خپل بچي نه هېڅوک هم نه هېرېږي دوی د ولس مابین کې اوسېدل د ولس دوی ته مینه ورکړې ده محبت یې ورکړی ده خپل زړونه یې ورکړي دي په خپلو کورونو کې ځای ورکړی ده د دوی سره همکاري کړې ده همدردي یې کړې دا نن چې موږ کابل کې ناست یو دا زموږ د ولس همکاري ده چې موږ بې جنګ او بغیر کوم مشکلاتو بغیر له وینو تویولو نه موږ کابل ته داخل سوي یو د امریکایانو زهرجن تبلیغات دلته شیندلي وو چې دغه خلک وحشت کوي او دهشت کوي هر سړی وزني او هر سړی باندې ظلم کوي قتل به کوي وینې به تویي خو اوس طالبان چې کله د کابل ته راغله پایتخت یې ونیو د خلکو ذهن خلاص شو چې یاره طالبان هغه طالبان نه دي چې موږ ذهنونه امریکایانو جوړ کړي وو یا نور اروپایانو جوړ کړي وو.
I entered this house hoping to pull the curtain and take a look inside the movement to understand what the Taliban actually thinks. I realized this is not going to be an easy task, so I decided to confront Commander Sajed with some of the group's contradictions and ask why the Taliban announced a supposedly inclusive government but left aside half the country's population. What about the women of Afghanistan? Many have been saying they want a place in the future of this country. Will you let them play a role?
امارت اسلامي یو روښانه پالیسي لري په روښانه پالیسي کې هر چاته ځای ورکړی ده د مشرانو خبره کړې ده انشاءالله په همغه طرز العمل باندې به کار رواني چې د ښځو ونډه به خامخا انشاءالله په حکومت کې خو په ټیټه پایه باندې په غټه پایه باندې په وزارتونو کې یا په نورو په هغه غټو پوسټونو باندې به ښځې نشي راتلی.
Can I ask you why is that? Why can't they be in higher positions if they are competent and if they have the training? Why can't they be ministers? Why can't they be as powerful as the man?
د امارت د پالیسي خو څه وایم خو د خپل ذهن په لحاظ باندې وایم چې د افغانستان امنیت تر اوسه پورې د صحیح د ښځو لپاره نه ده متيقن شوی ځکه 20 کاله په دې وطن باندې وحشت تیر شوی ده او ډېر بربریت تیر شوی ده د ښځو لپاره به انشاءالله زمینه په آینده کې برابرېږي چې په غټ پوسټونو باندې هم کېدای شي راسي خو په الحال د هغه دغه د نور د تعلیم په حساب کې د ښځو نه موږ مخکې مخالفونه اوس د امارت اسلامي په دغه 20 کاله د دور کې چې په دوی په کوم کې حکومت تیر شوی ده هلته د ښځو ته اجازه ورکول شوې ده چې خپلو مدرسو ته لاړ شي یا مکتبونو ته لاړ شي دا دنیا ته ښودلې ده اوس به انشاءالله په کابل کې دوی ته هر لحاظ باندې چې امارت اسلامي به کوشش کوي چې دوی ته د کار زمینه برابره کړي او کار ورکړي خو هغه وروستنۍ بعدي خبرې چې په غټ چوکۍ به دوی راسي او که نه هغه به وروسته خبرې
When the Taliban was last in power in Afghanistan, women accused of adultery were stoned to death. They couldn't leave their homes without a male relative and were not allowed to study. Will the Taliban's new rules for women be as draconian this time around? And will women accept them? At this private primary school in Kabul, girls make up half of the 600 students. I came here to see what an ordinary Monday morning looks like and to try and understand the challenges these Afghans now face.
Does she like school?
Staff say members of the Taliban paid them a visit and said they could continue their work for now and in accordance with Islamic law.
We want to improve Afghanistan by education. We try to make it easy to teach for our students and for our countries. We will try as much as possible.
But things were less clear when it came to universities. At the Ministry of Higher Education, I see a group of women, mostly accompanied by a male relative, trying to find out what is going to happen next. After some negotiation, I managed to enter the building and speak to the Deputy Minister for Higher Education. He agreed to talk to us, but refused to look at me. Nor would he give me his full name, asking instead to be called Professor Kamran. To avoid being fed the group's propaganda again, I try asking him a more personal question. I would like to know if you have sisters, a mother, and if you think that their education is important.
د مخو خپل خويندو ته خپل میندو ته هم د تعلیم غوښتنه ده چې دوی تعلیمونه وکړي پوهنتونونه وایي دیني مدارسو کې تعلیمونه وکړي ولکن د موږ فقط مشکل دغه و چې شرایط مناسب نه وو هغه مخکې نظام کې چې کوم دلته شرایط و هغه د اختلاط شرایط و په هغې شرایطو کې موږ نشوی کولی دوی ته اجازه ورکړو نو چې کله اوس اسلامي نظام دی او اسلامي نظام دغه ملت ته دا وعده ورکړي چې دوی ته به مناسب شرایط برابروي دوی ته د دوی عزت ته د دوی عفت ته به څه خطر نه وي او دوی ته به نور هم څه ځاني خطر نه مخامخ کیږي نو په هغې وخت کې زه خپلې خور ته خپلې مور ته هم اجازه ورکوم چې د خپله درس ووایي او خپل درسونه تکمیل کړي
I have been in Afghanistan for a week when I hear that women are about to take to the streets of the capital, despite stark warnings from the Taliban that such protests must stop.
Things got really tense a couple of moments ago. They still are. A large number of Taliban fighters are trying to stop the women from continuing their protest. A few days ago, the spokesperson for the movement said that they should not be taken to the streets anymore. And we are seeing that the fighters have received orders to stop these demonstrations.
This march was not their first protest, but was about to become the most important show of dissent the Taliban would face in their recently installed Islamic emirate.
ما خدا جهانی ها میخوایم لطفاً ما نسل سابق نیستیم ما نمیخوایم ما زنای سابق نیستیم دوزی نیستیم زنای سابقه نیستیم.
We don't accept the Taliban. We are against the Taliban because they are not free. They are not a free group. Even they are not Muslims.
Are you afraid for the future of Afghanistan? Oh my God, what is that? Okay. Things have just gotten much more complicated. Another group of protesters joined the women, and now things are likely to get very, very tense.
The question was, how would the Taliban respond? Fighters try to disperse the crowds, but end up overruled multiple times.
This is completely surreal.
The Taliban is now cornered.
The hands on and the
Trigger.
yeah.
Yeah, they're very, very, very tense. I don't think I've ever seen the Taliban so tense since I came into contact with them. This situation is out of control for them. It's out of their hands. Careful, careful. The Taliban can feel the pressure, and this is the first time they have such resistance. Here in the capital, which is now under their control.
The Taliban seem to realize they're losing control and quickly turn their attention to whoever's trying to capture the moment.
He's already pushed me aside twice.
Oh.
If he sees me again, I don't think he'll like it.
I said to him, please don't have anything with journalists.
Not so what?
Yeah, not so full. We got them.
Okay. What do you mean?
Because they will beat. Just you shot them.
They will beat me if I continue.
Yeah.
I approach one of the Taliban commanders managing the crowds.
Can I ask you a question? The amount of people in the streets, these scenes paint a very different Afghanistan from when the Taliban was last in power. Do you agree that this is a different Afghanistan now?
ما میخوایم یک حکومت همه شمول که هم افغانا خود دو ببینه هم افغانا خود دو احساس خود بکنه موجودیت خود بکنه حق و حقوقی که هر افغان در اینجا زندگی میکنه چی است پشتون است چی هزاره است چی ازبک است چی پنشیری است چی است بدخشان است همش برادر ما هستند ما میخوایم یک حکومت اسلامی که از همه مردم افغانستان تشکیل شود او را برپا کنیم ان شاء الله که همه مردم افغانستان دو خود ببینه ان شاء الله به خاطر از نیاز به همکاری است نیاز به تظاهرات و به گپا نیست ان شاء الله ما چه قسم بتونیم سوی تفاهم گپا را از بین ببریم ان شاء الله که مجاهدین غلام هیچ کس نبود نشد اگر غلام میشد خاص امریکا غلامش میشد که دلار میداد نه غلام پاکستانی که او با کلدار از غلامی بکنه این همه اینجا باید بفهمن تشکر از شما
تشکر. He didn't even look at me, but that's all right.
Now he's saying, please do not shoot anything. Do not do anything that make people angry.
The Taliban are getting impatient. One of the last interviews we filmed that day is of Nabila, a student who says she is ready to take this fight as far as she can.
This is quite dangerous for you, though. We've never seen the Taliban so tense. Aren't you scared?
I was scared in the past few 20 days. I say to myself, is your life most, valuable than the other people? if the independence of Afghanistan comes by this protest, I'm not sure if it works or not, but it's the only thing I can do. I'm not worried, but I want to use my fear to change it into my power. We are not the women of 20 years ago. I have my dreams, and I want to work for my dreams. So I'm a woman, I'm a girl, and I don't want to be controlled. I don't want to cover my face. It's my identity. Maybe I'm speaking a bit disorganized, but it's my feeling. I lost almost everything. Your independence is everything. I lost it. So I'm not afraid anymore. My life won't have any value if I just stuck in my home. It's stacking in your home is worse than being killed in here. Thank you.
As the march approaches the compound of the presidential palace, the Taliban decides this has to end.
We don't want any more Taliban. We want peace. Stop war.
Thank you.
Let's go, let's go.
It's too narrow, it's dangerous, it's dangerous.
Come. Yesterday's protest seems to have been a major turning point. The mood in the streets is different now. We have just heard of a new demonstration and are heading there because fighters are said to be rounding up everyone near the meeting point.
Can we go there?
Yes, done. We don't want film, okay?
Taufik has just been detained. We wanted to know if we could cover the protest, but we already knew that was not possible. He went to ask anyway, and he never came back.
It took 4 hours for Taufik to be released. And only then did we learn the extent of the repression. A group of journalists were detained and had their equipment confiscated during a protest in the Afghan capital Kabul this morning. Taliban fighters who largely outnumbered the protesters and the journalists said that they had orders to remove everyone from the site, saying that covering such protests is now illegal in Afghanistan. My producer was taken and described to me being beaten by 3 Taliban fighters who confiscated his phone and wallet. He has since been released and is very shaken, but says he wants to continue to work. And like him, many men and women have been saying they want to continue documenting what's happening in their country despite the violence they may be subjected to.
Oh.
12 days into my journey, I want to know what kind of justice the Taliban plans to deliver. And as hard as it will be to pin down exactly what their strategy is, there are warning signs. everywhere. Among their first moves as rulers was the release of virtually all prisoners convicted by the former government. Across the country, jails were opened and inmates freed. We decided to ask for access to Kabul's maximum security facility, potere, a symbol of harsh punishment and abuse built during the Soviet occupation in the 1980s. Later nicknamed Guantanamo when the Americans were in charge, potere is now under the control of the Taliban. Over 2,500 Taliban fighters used to be detained in these cells. Conditions were very difficult. Cells were very crowded. Now that the Taliban has taken over, there are some 60 prisoners, and fighters tell us that they are being treated fairly. Sharafatullah Hozaifa has just been appointed the director here. And while he learns the ropes at a new job, Commander Hozaifa repeats the message the Taliban keeps hammering home. All is forgiven, and it's time for a new chapter. But he also insists we should meet some of the prisoners they brought here. Right now they're offering us to go inside the cell with the inmates. There are about 60 people left here. I'm not sure how I feel about this, but I don't know that I have an option. We don't need to go in if they don't want us. I don't really want to cause any problems. He's smiling. What does that smile mean? Finally, we're allowed to talk to Mohammed, a Kabul resident, through a metal door. And we're even told what questions to ask him. He looks really young. How old is he?
23.
23.
22.
And why are you here?
I'm
Mohammed describes a small argument over a restaurant bill at a hotel in Kabul. The owner had a cousin that belongs to the Taliban. Mohammed's family doesn't know where he is, and Taliban guards don't tell us for how long they will be keeping him here, nor whether he will be granted a lawyer or a trial.
اگر مسلمان می صدای ما رو میشنه ما بیگناه هستیم بیادر فامیل ما رو اینجا انداخته سریس اسلامی ما را است ما به درشون قبول داره جاره که ما مسلمان قرآن قبول داره ما را پرسان ما رو کنه ما بیخی بیگناه هستیم بیادر.
The guards escort us out of the prison before we get a chance to speak to other inmates. While the Taliban promises a fairer Afghanistan, it is clear that their idea of justice is still coarse. We didn't find out what happened to the inmates at potere after our departure, but heard accounts of arbitrary arrests all over the country. Most of those imprisoned were local journalists. More direct opponents of the Taliban, such as members of the previous administration, would get harsher punishment. As my time in Afghanistan draws to a close, I meet Imal Ahmadi, whose life story embodies the pain and uncertainty Afghans are experiencing right now. His family also wanted to escape the Taliban, and asked for a visa to live in the United States, but the country supposed to grant them protection after years of loyal services became responsible for their demise.
انجینر زمره احمدی، زمیر، فرزاد، فیصل، ناصر، آروین، بنیامین، ملکه، آیت، سومایه. They are 10%.
Emal has just listed every single member of his family killed by America's last drone strike on Afghan soil.
Is my brother. They are face to face, some of them, like my daughter, my brother's sons. They are face to face. Unfortunately, it was a terrible accident in this yard. Just only God knows about my hurt.
20 years ago, the United States came to Afghanistan for Al-Qaeda, a group the Taliban had hosted and allowed to operate here. And while the US-led coalition succeeded in crippling the militants, there was serious collateral damage.
Were there any terrorists here?
Yeah, that you know better that you say it's a big mistake of you say that targeted the civilian person in here. First of all, they should find some information about my family, about my brother, what is his job, what's he doing, what's the member of their family doing. After that, if we are blamed that, they should target us.
The United States has since admitted wrongly targeting Emal's family and said authorities regret the incident.
As the Secretary says in the statement, we apologize and we will endeavor to learn from this horrible mistake.
No one's coming here, just only reporter person coming here. For example, that our government, no the USA, no one's coming here for ask us, for condolence of us. Yeah, my message is for especially for the USA and the other country that do not try to do a mistake in Afghanistan, do not try to target a civilian person, because that Afghan people like their member of their family a lot. And when they lost their father, brother, son, it's very difficult for them.
September 15, 2021. I'm heading to Kabul airport to leave Afghanistan after 2 weeks in the country. We managed to negotiate a seat on a cargo plane, one of the few means of transportation connecting Afghanistan with the outside world. Soviet-made Antonov will be my ride.
This plane has just arrived here in Kabul with food and medicine. And this is the plane that is going to be taking me out of here. We decided to leave for a number of reasons, but this is the hardest moment for me. Thank you.
It will be some time before I process everything I learned in Afghanistan. But as tragedy continues to unfold, it is clear Afghans yearn for peace, and the Taliban has a long way to go before it can deliver that. Whether the group has really changed is not the central question after all. Afghanistan has changed, and so have its people.
Time is over? We need to go? Okay. It's necessary.